the clock that taught Henry to stop waiting. There is a moment when you suddenly realize something terrifying. You have been busy living your days, but you haven't really been living your life. You wake up, check your phone, answer messages, scroll for a while, and promise yourself you'll start after that. Then work arrives, responsibilities pile up, evening comes, and you tell yourself the same thing, tomorrow. But what if tomorrow is the biggest lie you've ever told yourself? Welcome back to your channel. If you enjoy stories like this, support the channel with a quick subscription, and let's begin. Because today's story isn't really about a mysterious clock, it's about a young man who kept waiting for the perfect moment to start living until one strange encounter forced him to understand that time doesn't wait for anyone. Henry was always getting ready. Henry was 26 years old. From the outside, he seemed like someone who had his life under control. He had a job, he had plans, he had ambitions, and he had more notebooks than most people would ever need. One notebook was titled, "Things I Will Do This Year." Another said, "My 5-year plan," and another was filled with ideas for his future. There were goals everywhere. Learn photography, start exercising, build a small business, travel, write something, spend more time with his family, become financially independent. The problem wasn't that Henry lacked dreams. The problem was that he was always preparing to pursue them. If he wanted to start running, he would spend days researching the best running shoes. If he wanted to learn photography, he would watch tutorial after tutorial before taking a single photograph. When he thought about starting a business, he didn't begin with a product. He began with spreadsheets, names, logos, budgets, strategies, plans for the plans. Henry was incredibly good at preparing, but he was terrible at beginning. And he didn't realize that preparation had quietly become his favorite excuse. Noon, inistanilis. Another day, another tomorrow. One evening, Henry received a message from his old friend Peter. "Are you coming tonight?" Peter and some old friends were meeting at a small cafe near the river. Henry wanted to go. He hadn't seen them in months. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he looked at his unfinished work. Maybe next time, he thought. He put his phone down, and that night, something almost ridiculous happened. Henry spent 3 hours watching videos about productivity. He watched people explaining how to manage time, how to build habits, how to become disciplined, how to achieve goals. When he finally went to bed, he felt strangely satisfied. He had spent the entire evening learning how to become productive, but he hadn't actually produced anything. The next morning, Henry walked to work, and that's when he noticed something he had passed hundreds of times before. An old shop. Above the door was a strange sign. "Time repaired here." Henry stopped. He had never noticed it before. Curiosity pulled him inside. The mysterious clock shop. The shop was unlike anything Henry had ever seen. There were clocks everywhere, huge clocks, tiny clocks, pocket watches, broken watches, old clocks with cracked glass. Some were ticking, some had stopped, and some didn't even have hands. Behind the counter sat an elderly man. His name was Mark. The old man looked at Henry and said something strange. "You're late." Henry laughed. "I've never been here before." Mark smiled. "That's why you're late." Henry didn't understand. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. A beautiful silver pocket watch sat on the counter. "Is that watch broken?" Henry asked. "No." "Then why is it here?" Mark picked up the watch. "Someone brought it to me 20 years ago. And they never came back?" Mark shook his head. Henry frowned. "That doesn't make sense." The old man looked directly at him. "It will." Then he opened the watch. The second hand was moving. Tick, tick, tick. Mark placed it gently on the counter. Most people think wasting time means doing something useless. He pointed toward the clocks surrounding them. "But there's a more dangerous way to waste your life." Henry looked at him. Mark continued, "Spending your time preparing for a life you never actually live." Henry suddenly felt uncomfortable, because those words sounded far too familiar. "Amates, den te kon comfortable, te pura beige nun time to near him in to Bermenfamo. And some were never repaired because their owners kept saying they would come back tomorrow. Henry stared at him. And what happened to those owners? Mark smiled. Tomorrow happened. Those 3 words stayed inside Henry's mind all day. That evening, he opened one of his notebooks. At the top of the page was a list he had written 8 months earlier. Things I will start soon. Learn photography. Exercise. Call dad. Travel somewhere alone. Build a business. Write something. Spend more time with friends. Henry stared at the list. 8 months had passed, and almost nothing had changed. Then he noticed something he had never noticed before. Next to every goal, there was a condition. I'll start when I have more money. I'll start when I have more time. I'll start when I understand everything. I'll start when I feel confident. I'll start when life becomes easier. Henry suddenly understood. He wasn't waiting for the right time. He was using the idea of the perfect time to hide from the fear of beginning. Ming Ming Dane, a question that changed everything. The next morning, Henry returned to the clock shop. I want the watch, he said. Mark handed him the silver pocket watch. How much? Mark shook his head. It isn't for sale. Then why did you give it to me? Mark turned the watch over. He opened the back. Inside was a tiny inscription. Henry leaned closer. It said, "Time does not ask what you planned." Henry looked up. Mark said quietly, "You think you're saving your life for later?" He paused. "But later is not a storage room." Henry said nothing. Then Mark asked him one question. If you knew you had exactly 1 year left, what would you stop postponing? Henry didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answers came immediately. He would call his father. He would see his friends. He would travel. He would create instead of endlessly preparing. He would take care of his body. He would stop being afraid of looking foolish. He would finally begin the things he kept promising himself he would do someday. Mark looked at him, then asked, "So why are you waiting?" Henry stared at the clock. "I don't know." Mark smiled. "That's the most expensive answer people give." Yin. Henry finally began. Henry didn't suddenly become a different person. He didn't quit his job. He didn't become rich overnight. He didn't wake up at 5 in the morning and magically become disciplined. Instead, he did something much simpler and much harder. He stopped negotiating with himself. If he wanted to exercise, he exercised for 20 minutes. If he wanted to write, he wrote 1 page. If he wanted to learn something, he stopped collecting tutorials and actually practiced. If he wanted to call someone, he called. If he had an idea, he gave it a beginning. His first photography project was terrible. His first business idea failed. His exercise routine was inconsistent. His first attempt at writing embarrassed him, but something had changed. For the first time in his life, Henry was failing at things he genuinely wanted to accomplish. And strangely, those failures felt better than his old success at planning, because at least now he was moving. Spithenelpel, the call from his father. Months passed. Then one afternoon, Henry received a phone call. It was his father. "Can you come home this weekend?" Henry almost gave his usual answer. "I'm busy." But this time, he stopped. He thought about the silver pocket watch. He thought about Mark, and he thought about all the times he had promised himself he would make more time for his family. So he said, yes. He drove home. That afternoon, Henry and his father sat outside and talked about things they had never really discussed before. They talked for hours. As the sun began to disappear, his father looked at him. "You seem different." Henry smiled. "I finally realized I don't have unlimited time." His father laughed softly. "None of us do." The clock shop was gone. That night, Henry took out the silver pocket watch. Something was wrong. The second hand had stopped. Henry became worried. The next morning, he went back to Mark's shop, but there was no shop. The sign was gone. The windows were covered in dust. There were no clocks, no pocket watches, no Mark, nothing. Henry looked around in disbelief. He asked the shopkeeper next door, "Do you know what happened to the old man who owned this place?" The man looked confused. What old man? The clockmaker. The man shook his head. There hasn't been a clock shop here for years. Henry stared at him. That can't be right. The shopkeeper pointed toward the building. It used to be a storage room. Henry looked down at the silver watch in his hand. His heart began beating faster. He opened the back. The inscription was still there. Time does not ask what you planned. But this time, Henry noticed something beneath it. A second line. 4 words. Use what remains. Mini nanom Hugh. What happened to Mark? Henry never discovered who Mark really was. Maybe he had been real. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe the entire experience had been some strange coincidence. Or perhaps the clock shop was simply a moment in Henry's life that appeared exactly when he needed it. But eventually, Henry realized that the answer didn't matter, because the message was real and he carried it with him. Years later, Henry became successful, not because he discovered some secret formula, not because he became the smartest person in the room, and not because he suddenly became fearless. He became successful because he stopped treating his life like a rehearsal. Whenever someone asked him what changed everything, he always gave the same answer. I stopped waiting to become ready because the truth is uncomfortable. You will never feel completely ready. You will never have perfect confidence. You will never have unlimited money. You will never have unlimited time. And you will never eliminate uncertainty. If you keep waiting until everything feels perfect, you may spend your entire life standing at the starting line. Minin spoofko, the real way we waste our lives. Wasting your life doesn't always look like lying in bed doing nothing. Sometimes it looks like being busy. Sometimes it looks like planning. Sometimes it looks like learning. Sometimes it even looks like working extremely hard. You can spend 10 years preparing for something and still never do it. Preparation is valuable only when it eventually becomes action. Knowledge matters when you use it. Dreams matter when you pursue them. And time matters because once it is gone, you cannot buy it back. You don't have to change your entire life tomorrow. You don't need a perfect 5-year plan. You don't need to become a completely different person overnight. You just need to stop wasting today. Make the call, start the project. Take the first step. Learn the skill. Go outside. Create something. Spend time with the people you love. And if you fail, fail while moving forward, because one day you may look back and realize that the ordinary days you barely noticed were actually the most valuable days of your life. The lesson Henry never forgot. There is something especially uncomfortable hidden inside Henry's story. Sometimes we don't waste time because we don't know what to do. We waste it because we already know exactly what we should do and we keep postponing it. Maybe there's a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe there's a dream you've been delaying. Maybe there's a skill you've wanted to learn. Maybe there's someone you keep telling yourself you'll call someday. But someday isn't a date on the calendar, and tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So ask yourself one simple question. What is the one thing I keep postponing that I already know I should start? Don't make another plan for it. Don't watch another 10 videos about it. Don't wait for motivation. Take one real step, because your future isn't built by what you intend to do. It's built by what you actually do with the time you have. And perhaps that's what Mark was trying to tell Henry all along. Time doesn't care about your plans. It keeps moving. Tick, tick, tick. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you're fearless. Don't wait until you're ready. Start with what you have. Start where you are. Start today. And when you look back years from now, you may discover that the greatest decision you ever made was simply refusing to say tomorrow one more time. If this story made you think about your own life, support the channel by subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this message. And remember, your life is happening right now, not tomorrow, not someday, right now. So don't just plan to live, live.